Good morning, students. Okay, now in the previous topic, we can discuss about the different type of disaster the definitions of disasters, types of disasters, and then after the disaster management cycles, what is the disaster management? Now, the today's topic is the disaster phases and the risk of disaster management. So, first of all, the disaster phases. So, experts have long noted that the cycle of emergency management must be including the long term work on the infrastructures, public awareness, and even human issues, so that the process of this disaster management is says that the expert is says that after the disasters they have to decide the different phases, and they have to divide the four phases: mitigations, the preparations, then response and recovery. So now we can discuss deeply. The first one is mitigations. So what is the meaning of the mitigation system? You can see the figures. First one is the mitigation phase. In this phase, we can consider the public educations, awareness, hazard assessment, then vulnerability assessment, improvement infrastructures. Then after, we can discuss about the preparedness phases. Here you can see that the national emergency declared, then after the telecommunications response plans, then training and expenses on warning and etc. Then after the response phases, in the response phases we can say is that consider that the communications, coordinations and saving lives. And the last phase is recovery phases. Yes, so in the recovery phases, restoring the telecommunications, then after improving the lives and recovery of the other services. So now discuss about the mitigation phase. So mitigations phase, we can discuss the minimizing the effect of disasters. It means that the mitigation phase different from the other phases because it focus on the long term measurement for reducing the risk. So in other words, we can say that the mitigation efforts attempt to so the implementation of the mitigation strategy can be considered as the part of the recovery process. So it is applied after the disaster occurs. So that if applied the part of recovery efforts, so that we can say that the action that reduce or the eliminate the risk over the time are still considered mitigations efforts. So measuring the mitigations can be structural and non-structural. So structural, if I consider the structural measurement, use the terminology solutions like the food levels. Non-structures, if I consider the non-structural measurement, includes the le- legislations. For example, The designations of the non-signed land, like the part to be used as the flood zone and insurance, so that the mitigation is the most efficient method for the reducing the impact of hazards, so that the mitigation is not always suitable and the structural mitigations in the particular may have adverse the efforts on the ecosystems. Now we can say that the preserves. So now the activity to the mitigations is the identification of risk. It means the if I consider the physical risk assessment refers to the process of the identify and the evaluating the disasters. In the risk assessment, various disasters will be considered within the certain area and identify. Now each disaster pose the risk to the pollutions within the area assessment. So this one is called the disaster specific risk. Here you can see that RH. Here you can see that RH, the combination of the both the probability and the level of impact. Probability and level of impact. It means the here represent the H and VH. So that the equations gives the disasters time of populations. This is the vulnerability to the disaster product of risk. If I consider the highest risk, the more urgent that the disaster specific vulnerability are targeted by mitigations and the preparedness efforts, so that you can see here the risk is defined by the consider the natural event and the social factors. So now we can study the risk. So what is the risk factor here? Here the risk factor, there are the two points will be considered, the hazards and vulnerability. It means the dimensions of vulnerability assessment, which will consider the economic and the environmental. Now discuss with the hazards. So potentially damaging the events whose probable characteristic and the frequency of the occurrence can be established or estimated. It means that we can estimate the damaging events and the probable characteristic and frequency of the occurrence. In similar way, the vulnerability, the incredible characteristic of the elements at the risk of the determine how the damage they will be experienced to the disaster event of the some level. So we can say that the vulnerability is the physical vulnerability analysis impact of the event on assessment such as building and infrastructure and agriculture. If I consider the social vulnerability, the estimate of impact of events on high vulnerable groups such as the poor, cropping capacity and stated institution structures and etc. If I consider the economic vulnerability, the potential impact hazards assessed and process, it means the business interruptions and secondary effects. If I consider the environmental vulnerability so that degrade the environment quality limits and the natural resilience to hazards effects. So this one is the basic ideas about the mitigations phases. Now the considerations of the pre preparedness. So here preparedness means the planning how to respond. So in the preparedness phase, the emergency managers develop the plan of actions for when the disaster strikes. It means that this one is considered at that time when the disaster will arise. So preparedness, the common preparedness measurement includes, if I consider the communications plan with the easily understand terminology and chain of the command. It means that we can make a one communications plan. We can use the nowadays, we can use the media players and lot of the social works, social medias and etcs. Then after the develop and the practice of the multi-agency coordinations and incidents command. Then after the proper maintenance and training of the emergency service. Then after the developed and the exercise of emergency populations method. It means that affect the efficient parameters measured in the emergency operation center. This is called the EOC. It means that emergency operation centers which combined with the practiced region wide destroying of the managing emergencies. Another aspect of the preparedness is costly predictions, the study of how may how many deaths or injuries to expert for the given kind of event. So in this planner and the idea of what resources need to be in place to respond to the particular kind of event. It means if I consider the earthquake, so after the earthquake we can plan the which type of materials and the how much death is, what is the injuries, how many people will be injured. This one is the preparedness for the planning to respond. Now the next one is response. So response is considered. Now consider the response. This is the efforts to minimize the hazards created by the disasters. It means that the response phase includes the mobilizations of the necessary emergency service and the first responder in the disaster area. Here we require such as a rescue efforts commence at the early stage, so that if I consider response the response phase includes the mobility of the necessary emergency service. It means include the first wave of the core emergency service such as the fire brigade, police and ambulance crew and etc. They may be supported by the number of secondary emergency service such as specialties rescue team. In addition, the volunteers and the non-government organizations, it means the non-government organizations such as the local Red Cross branch may provide the immediate practical assistance. It means that the response is include when the disaster occurs, after the disasters, the rescue will be considered. It means that if the earthquake is arise like disasters, after the disasters, after the earthquake, it will be required the rescue of some peoples and rescue of the some properties. So this one is they consider as the response. Now the next one is recovery phase. Here the recovery phase will be considered that the returning the community to the normal. It means the aim of the recovery phase is to restore the affected area to its previous stage. It means that the important aspect of the effective recovery efforts is taking the advantages of the window of opportunity for the implementation of multi-giving measurement. So here we can see the four phases: mitigations, then preparedness, then after the response and recovering. In these four stages, we can easily understand with the now situations. It means the corona situations. If I consider the first stage, the mitigation minimize the effect of disasters. So in our first stage of the corona stage, at that time we can apply the worst lockdown. Lockdown is the mitigation phase in the first phase of the corona to remove or effect reduce the or minimizing the effect of these disasters. Then after preparedness phase, so in the corona consider the corona disasters, we can manage and develop the plan for action when the disaster strike is considered. It means that after that we can another lockdown given for the long time because of to reduce or minimizations of the corona disasters. Now then after the response, it means that the effect to the minimize the disaster created by the hazards created by the disasters. It means that when the after the response systems, we can consider that the after the lockdown or in durations of the lockdown period, at that time we can rescue the some peoples who is already the corona, and they have to make a response from the or the history of the travel history, and that means we can rescue the other peoples from this corona. यहाँ पे मैं ये कहना चाहता हूँ कि यहाँ पे हम जब लॉकडाउन ड्यूरेशंस में किसी को कोरोना होता है तो हम पहले उसको रेस्क्यू करके हॉस्पिटल में ले जाते हैं और उसको उसकी हिस्ट्री पूछते हैं, जिससे जिन लोगों को हो सकता है उसको हम पहले से ही उसकी ट्रीटमेंट स्टार्ट कर दें। सो इन फेज़ को हम रिस्पॉन्स सिस्टम कहते हैं और रिस्पॉन्स फेजेस कहते हैं। एंड देन आफ्टर इन द लास्ट स्टेज, रिकवरी स्टेज, it means the unlock the lockdown and try to make an environment for the previous stage of the situations. It means the aim of the response phase is to restore the effect of area to its the previous stage. So these four stage we can make the nowadays corona situations is we easily understand about this one is the four phases of the disasters. Now we can learn the one word risk. So what is the risk in the disasters? So here the conceptual framework from the measuring the risk of the climate change. It means the if I consider the risk, it means example of the risk is expected losses of lives. So this one is risk is depend on the two main parts is the treated and the elements at risk. This one is called the inherent volatility. Now, if I consider the threat, it means that climate change hazard due to the low laying terminology, it is called the inherent, which is not subject to policy or the government governance. Then after consider the elemented risks is the people living in area export. This is called the scale of the impact. And if these two additions, we can subtract the natural reliances. It means that the ability to cope and the adapted. It means they cope with the manage the adverse effect or the back from the impact. It means the natural. So risk is considered these two things is the human made, but not we can say that is the naturalized. It means the risk will be considered. There are the two types, the naturally and the humanity. The natural is not our hands, but the humanity will be in our hands. Of this one is the basic importance of the risk. Now the disaster mitigations effect in India. So several actions have been eliminated towards the disaster mitigation systems. A national communications plan has been drawn up the harmonizing the modern system communications. It means that the flow, assessments of the warning etc. The National Institute of Disaster Management is ensured with the developing the training campus, then disaster management code, human resource development, and the awareness creations program and educations. It means that in the disaster efforts in India, we can training of the peoples how to do or what to do when the disaster is arise. For example, if the earthquake is arise or earthquake is disasters, at that time we can do the how many people when can rescue, how to rescue, and which kind medical treatment will be in initial level will be given. This one is the doing in the different stages and different institutes level we can learn these things. Then after we can consider the emergency involving the electrical power system. So electrical power system is the subjective numerical technical considerations restricted. We cannot turn to prevent the power outages. It means that the place burden on the both the electric utility and the state to implement the appropriate and the effective control measurement. It means the electrical power system is subject to numerous technical considerations restricting which do not prevent the outsources. So with the power sector reforms, the India most of the utility have been unbundled and the major utility in the generator transmission and distribution sectors, and this one is the 24th. The disaster and the impact warning systems and response management and the mitigations is the National Power Training Institute. So next one is the disaster management in the power utilizations. Basically under the several different type of circumstances will be occur at that time the electrical power system could be damaged well beyond the level of the normal design criteria for the maintaining reliability. All the electricity works networks, the components are directly connected with each other. It means that the generator transmissions and distributions is connected in the together. When the under the several different type of the circumstances, the electrical power system could be damaged when the beyond of the levels. It means the earthquake, flood, and the hurricane type of the natural disaster could damage the many electrical power system component causing the widespread outages over the long period of the restorations and the recovery. So even more ominously the terrorist could immunite act will destroy the criteria of the component. So now the overview of the cost of blackout. The blackout have the impact that are both the direct and indirect. When we consider the direct impact, it means the blackout have that if I consider the direct impact of the activity functions and the service that required, it means that the direct impact include the flood spoil, damage to the electronic data, and inoperative of the life support system in hospital and homes. So the direct impact can be avoided if the end user has backup system, but these have often the prove unreliable. So now we consider the indirect impact due to the interrupted activities or the services. It means that property losses resulting from the arson and losing overtime payment of the policy and fire personnel and the potential increases in the rate. So that to basically these two things will be considered when the blackout. So in the 2002 the one blackout will be arise, and at that time the all system will be dropped. The blackout is considered when the overloading of the load. It means the end user will be consume the more current of we can calculate the required power. At that time blackout will be arise, and this one is the one type of the disaster because when the blackout is arise, the recovery of the powers and after the restricting of the blackout they have to more time to restore and set up the powers. So now today we learn about the different phases of the disaster management, what is the risk, and what is the impact of the power utilization in India and the power sector. If any doubt regard this topic, you can contact me, and if any questions arise of this topic, you can also send me the mail. My mail ID and the contact number is seen your screen. Thank you.